Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to do a different kind of video with you. This is going to be on a more personal level, and I just wanted to share a little bit about depression. I mentioned this on Instagram recently about, feeling like you're just existing and you're not actually living. And how many of you guys have ever felt like that in your life? Like you're just existing, you're sort of going through the motions of life, but you're not fully living, like you don't feel like you're actually living your life. So that was me for years and years. And so the first half of my life was it was very dysfunctional. So I figured what I would do is I wanted to share sort of like the 180 of it, and kind of like not just talk about the downer part of depression, but also the part about things that can help you sort of pull yourself out of it and get to a good place, or at least a better place in time. So I'll give you a little bit of background so you can kind of understand the foundation of how my depression started developing and why I was in it for years. So when I was about 6 years old, my mom developed a mental illness. It was schizoaffective disorder. So that's schizophrenia combined with a mood disorder. And that can be, if it's in a very bad, severe state, it can be a very volatile situation. So that was kind of her case. And around that same time, I can't remember if it was like a little before or a little bit after, but my parents did separate, and they stayed married, but they just separated. My dad lived down the street from us, and so he was still always like, in our life every single day, like trying to make sure everything was okay, trying to get her to her appointments, mental health, the organization, mental health, government organization. Let me tell you, they are not the most efficient people in the world at getting stuff done, but whatever. That was like a whole other frustration and stress, like in its own self. So on one side, my brother and I had my mom, who had the schizoaffective disorder, and she would have to go into appointments pretty regularly at mental health. They would prescribe her medication, and she would go into this cycle of taking her medication for, a few months or so, or maybe even, 6 months to a year, and then she would end up wanting to go off of it. And then when she would go off of it, she would spiral downhill really quickly. The voices in her head would get more progressively dangerous, so to speak. Like, we couldn't do anything. No one could make her take her medication. That was the law, and that was how mental health worked. The organization, mental health, would not step in. They would not, make her take her medication. They would not put her in the hospital to get her on medication. She would just have to spiral downhill until she either was a danger to herself or others. So that is the key there. That was a cycle that continued, and it was a roller coaster, and that same cycle occurred over and over and over again for many years. And so that was a really frustrating part, because that is such a broken system that you can't help a person until they're trying to kill themselves. And on the other side, we had my dad, who did his best, but also turned to alcohol to help alleviate his stress. And although he was trying to do his best, the alcohol, it changes the person's mood, makes them very, more aggressive, more angry, more, yelling, and it just does not help the situation, you know what I mean? So we've got dad drowning himself in alcohol, and mom with schizoaffective disorder, who hears voices and doesn't trust you and doesn't know who you are, and you're living with her 24/7. So there is that combination going on. My brother is 6 years older than me, so he was a little bit older, and he was able to take off a little more often, and I think he kind of used that as an escape. He would be able to be at his friend's house all the time. He would, I think, try to just stay gone as much as possible, and he got, really into sports. He was into surfing and mountain biking. We lived in Oregon, right on the coast, and so he was really into all the sports and everything going on up there. So I think that was really good and really healthy for him to get out, get away from it, and go start building his life, and kind of just have that sort of escape and be able to get exercise and get those endorphins flowing. I kind of became, I was much younger, and I became kind of like my mom's like right-hand man, so to speak. Like, I was always there, always home, taking care of her, trying to give her medication, which was always a struggle. So sometimes, we kind of had this agreement, like family agreement. My dad would kind of like coach me on, here, you need to, make sure she gets her medication. If you have to, put it in her food. So I would have to take her pills when she would refuse to take it, and I would like crush the pills between 2 spoons and have to like put it in her food, so she would be able to, get the medication she needed to remain balanced, because if she didn't get that, she'd go downhill in a hurry. So let me go ahead and explain some of that now. Now like the background picture, right? So God, just just like thinking about it gives me like this hangover feeling in my head. Okay, so anyway, yeah, so I did like all the grocery shoppings and everything, like everything she needed. I was always there to make sure she got what she needed, making sure she was taking her baths, and she hated showering or taking a bath, right? So anyway, I was the one that was kind of like always there with her and always dealing with like her not recognizing me and like, who are you, and not trusting me, and I'm like a freaking like, you know, little kid. And this went on from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. This is years in the making, you know. This was not like a short blip of life. Although now it kind of feels like it, which is a good thing. We can finally break out of that, right? So that's what sparked my depression, and that's what, you know, it was just this downer, and it just like went on for years. So let me jump ahead to when I was 13, and that was like a low point, but it was also a turning point. So you know how I mentioned about the roller coaster, and when the person stops taking the medication, you know, they can be taking it, they'll be at a peak, they'll be good, and then all of a sudden if they get off of it, they start going downhill pretty quickly. So as she's going downhill, the things that change are like the thoughts, you know, they become more aggressive. She's getting more angry, and the thoughts are getting more negative, and she's thinking that people are out to get her, or that things are really bad. You know, it just, everything starts like imploding, like caving in. So she starts going downhill because she gets off her medication. You know, if she like recognized it in food or something, she wouldn't eat, and so then I just couldn't give her any medication. You know, I couldn't sneak it to her, and she would refuse to take it. So she would be spiraling downhill. No one would help, no one would step in. Mental health, you know, the organization would be like, sorry, she has to be a danger to herself or others, so she has to actually do something to prove that, right? Like, you have to prove that. Oh, I just like, so for her to prove that, she actually had to commit something. She would have to commit some sort of action that would prove that she was dangerous, right? So it was so backwards, such a backwards system. So it's at one of these points where my mom had gotten off her medication and started going downhill. The voices started getting, you know, progressively more negative. The person gets more delusional. They don't recognize you. They're a paranoid schizophrenic. They're afraid of everything. They think everything is evil. Everything is out to get them. And she just starts, you know, talking to herself like quite loudly and much more aggressively, and it's very a scary situation, unless you're used to it. I don't know, it's very weird to say this, but I was really used to it, and so I wasn't afraid for myself at all, or, you know. So during this time, my main concern was her and making sure that she wasn't going to hurt herself. So any medications of any kind, I would make sure those were put away, and anything that she could hurt herself with, you know, we would try to make sure it was not around. And she did say something about my cockatiel. She thought it was evil. She was kind of like afraid of it. So I got very concerned at that point, and so I went to the store and bought 2 little locks. I remember these little purple locks, little miniature locks, and I would have them on the cage. So I had to go off to school during the daytime, and I would lock my cockatiel's cage up just to make sure that, you know, she didn't get in there and harm it. So months had gone by, right? This is like talking like 6 months later since I've heard her say anything about my bird being evil. So I'm home from school, I'm playing with my cockatiel, and then I gotta go shower. So I put it back in its cage, close the door, and I go shower. I was in there for like less than 5 minutes, like super quick. I come right back out, and the cage was like, I don't know, like 10 or 15 feet from the shower door, like I'm right close to it. And I come back out, and the cage door is open, and my bird is gone. So for a second, I'm kind of like glancing around my room to see if like the bird got out somehow, and if it's like climbing around somewhere, and I didn't see it. So right then my heart starts pounding. I'm kind of freaking out. I'm sort of having like this mini heart attack, and I'm kicking myself at the same time because I didn't close the lock on the door. Only one door was locked on the cage, and the one that I just put it in through, I didn't close the lock on it. And I went and found my mom, and she had just come in from outside, and I was like, where is my bird? You know, where's Skippy? And she's like, it's gone. And I'm like, what do you mean it's gone? And she's like, it's outside. And so I go outside, and it's on the porch, dead. So immediately I grab the phone, I call my dad, I tell him what happened, and he comes over right away. We see a board. Apparently my mom had taken the bird outside and killed it with a board. So yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, like my heart is like beating just like reliving this experience. So that was like, I mean, I felt just like, oh man, I felt so bad. So that's how my cockatiel died. My mom had killed it, and my dad and I found it, we buried it, and I was absolutely crushed. I felt so, like, such an immense guilt for, you know, because I fucked up. I didn't lock the cage. I guess I should mention that all up until this point, I was already in depression before that happened, you know, because everything started going downhill when I was like 6 years old, right? So it was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I was already like in a deep depression, just felt like I existed and I wasn't actually living my life, you know. I just felt like I was just there and just like in this chronic stress and depression. I just felt like I was trapped. You know, rock bottom is right about when the bird thing happened. And then the next day, I gotta get up and go to school. Like, everything is fine, just like normal. So I get up, go to school. I can't remember if it was that day or the next day or something, but right around, it was like just shortly after that happened to my bird, that I was called down from school, you know, out of class, and the office would call me down to talk to the caseworker. And he would just stop in like once a month or so and just like check on me and just have like a little meeting. I guess that was just their way, like mental health's way of like checking on me away from family, so I could just like talk freely or something, I guess. I mean, I was pretty open with everything, so I didn't think anything about just sitting down and like telling him what happened, you know. So I didn't even think beyond that. I just said, you know, oh, he's like, how's everything going? I'm like, well, you know, she killed my best friend the other day or whatever, you know, the other night, and so there's that. And he was like, what? And I'm like, oh, my bird, you know, my cockatiel. So after the caseworker had got that information, then he talked to mental health and somehow arranged, I think it was the day after that, that they picked me up at school. After school, it was like right towards the end of school, they called me out. They didn't even tell me this ahead of time. They just called me out and they said, bring all your stuff and we're taking you to a foster home. And I'm like, what? I was pissed. So they like loaded me in the car with my backpack and drove me off to the foster home. So I spent one night at the foster home, and the next day I split immediately from school and I went straight to my neighborhood. I went actually to my friend's house, hung out there for a little while, and then walked home to my house. And I was just like, nope, I'm not going to the foster home. There's nothing you can do. I'm not going there. I'm gonna be at home where I need to be. So that was like my foster home experience and how I got there. Shortly after that, my mom did end up going in for like, I guess like the mental health appointment that was finally made because she had killed my bird. So that proved that she was a danger, you know, to herself or others. And so she was finally able to get into the hospital, and they put her back on medication. And they do injections first, usually in the hospital, and then they'll switch to oral medications, so pills, after she, you know, is able to get out and, you know, go back home and stuff. So that was one snapshot of my life many years ago, and that was just one of the many scenarios that went on, and it was so stressful, like the entire period. Like, it just felt like this never-ending chronic stress and depression, and it just felt like there was no escape out of it. It was just, you know, it just kept you in this roller coaster motion, and it was always just like, you always felt like you were being traumatized by something that was going on, you know. It was always regards to my mom and stuff that she would do and dealing with her delusions. And after a point in time, there's just so much to try to deal with that you just feel like so broken that you just don't want to go on anymore. You don't want to wake up in the morning, you don't want to live anymore, you just want to take yourself out because you just feel like you're existing, you're not living your life, you're not in control of your life at all, you're like completely at the mercy of all of this stress and chronic depression and problems that you're going through. And during this time, I was thinking so much about, you know, how to take myself out. Like, I was wishing that I could get hold of something like sleeping pills or something that I could overdose on so I could just like go to sleep. I was trying to find a painless way to do it. And instead of, you know, actually following through and trying to seek something out that I could take and put myself to sleep, put myself out of my misery, I started thinking about the after effect, like what would go on afterwards, like after I was gone. One of them was thinking about what it would do to my family. On top of everything else that they were already going through, I thought, ugh, well, that's the last thing they need, you know? Like, I don't want to add to that, right? The second thing is I had that little glimmer of hope that I had always wanted to get married, and I thought, oh, how cool that would be to, you know, go find my best friend, you know. All right, guys, I think since I've talked so much in this video, I'm just gonna kind of leave off here and just make this like a story time video. And in the next video or in a future video, I can share like the specific things that I did, specific steps that helped me, you know, pull myself out of the depression and kind of like get myself together and sort of like start fresh and like start living my life. So I guess like go from existing to living your life like proactively. There is definitely specific things that helped me. So I want to share that in a separate video because I want to be more, I don't know, I want it to be more creative instead of just like sitting here talking to you, because it'll all like run together. All right, guys, I'm starting to lose my light, so I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.